grapes and, whatever. But boy, when the ladies came years ago, for the first time, I really appreciated. My vegetarianism became very easy. And we used to sit around and have good satsang and good food and good association and all that so important. And you'll learn to miss these days. I can remember our little group, and now those of you who've been down to Triton College over there, that's the remnants of that group, and it's 400-500 people over there. And you lose that kind of intimacy, and so enjoy this kind of intimacy. This is really rare. Well, we're going to continue where we left off. Maybe not exactly where we left off, because the subject that we're about to get into, the relationships that we're in and how we can best utilize those relationships that we're in to accelerate our own spiritual growth. Before I get into that topic, because that's a big one, and I'm going to need plenty of room, and I want to give you some kind of a preface so that you can follow me as we try to squeeze all the juice we can out of it. I'm going to need to say something just a little bit more about ego and all these other things. And for those of you who are with us for the first time or are new to this here, I have to remind you that sometimes when we talk about ego, it sounds very rough and it's kind of hard. It takes a while to get used to it because we've been so attached to our egos, But I certainly don't mean to offend anybody when we hammer away at this ego, but we have to hammer away at this ego in order for us to break free from it so that we can move on to higher dimensions of who we really are. And towards that end, I want to give you a kind of cosmology, if you will. Because sometimes if you get a big picture, then you can see where we fit into the picture. And I want to talk about that cosmogony as it relates to our image and our identity. Because this image that we have of ourselves and the identity that we have of ourselves is going to become so important that we really understand this. Because everything that we do henceforth, especially when we get into meditation, you remember last time I said that bottom line, you got to learn this art called meditation. You have to learn how to go into the deep recesses of your own consciousness and there encounter your own truth. Because that's where the truth is at. The truth is not in scriptures, has never been. The scriptures actually came out of somebody's discovery of their own inner truth when you think about it. From where has Quran come from? And where has the Bible come from? And where has, all of these holy scriptures and deep scriptures? I'm not demeaning the scriptures. The scriptures are tremendous. But the experience that made a Muhammad did not come out of the Quran. And the experience that made a Jesus did not come out of the Bible. Nor the enlightenment that is reflected in Torah. That did not come out of Torah. It came from the journey within the deep recesses of one's own consciousness. And the methodology for doing that is called meditation, yoga, prayer. There's been so many different kinds of names for it. But that is the real thing. The whole purpose of all of this satsang that we're having is to simply induce you, to seduce you, if I can, to somehow trigger in you some kind of appetite, some kind of passion that'll give you the courage, if not the courage, then the greed, to try to move deep within yourself and get a taste of who you really, really are. So I want to give you a kind of overview. This image and identity that we have of ourselves, because it is our attachment to this thing that is just really causing all kinds of hell in our relationship. Because we cling to this image and the identity that we have formed of ourselves, and that makes us inflexible, don't it? You see, when we move into relationship, and the relationship itself is in the Tao, it is flowing, subject to change. And then when we are called upon to change, we have difficulty changing. We really do. We can't adapt. We can't surrender. Hence, surrendering is a very important concept on the path. You hear so much talking about surrendering to the will of God, to the will of Allah. But how can you surrender if you are clinging, stuck to this thing? You can't do it. Hence, You read the scriptures, but it's hard for you to follow them because you can't surrender. You can't make that necessary change at the personal level to follow the teaching. You see my point? It's not that there's the problem is not the absence of teachings. The world is full of 300 religions now, over 3,000 that are extant, that you don't even know anything about it anymore, that is not even being practiced on the planet anymore. So the world is full of teachings, and all of them have something to contribute to it. So the problem is not finding the real teachings. The problem is finding yourself. The problem is freeing yourself from your own attachment and unwillingness to change, to adapt to the teachings. Isn't that the hard part? Now, these great teachers, these great rabbis and yogis, they give us such beautiful teachings. They say, okay, now you adopt the vegetarian diet and you live your life like that. And the teachings are there, but you can't do it. Why can't you do that? Why can't you do that? What is it that makes that so difficult, so almost impossible, that constitutes so much of a struggle? Because you are attached to the actions and the behaviors associated with your image and your identity, and it's become solid, rock hard, a vasana, a habitual mental pattern. And you can't break the habit. Because that habit supports your sense of who you are. I eat meat, that's who I am. So I can't drop this stuff. Or the mystic come and say, and you drop drugs, you drop alcohol. Now this is hard for you. Why? Because that drinking, that drugging plays a part in maintaining your image and your identity, and you're clinging to that and you can't let it go. The mystics come, they say, okay, you do this yoga. You find 2 or 3 hours a day to devote to this pursuit of God realization, but you can't do that. Because you're so attached to all your activities. Well, you know, I got to watch, my late movie, and I can't be getting up at no 3 o'clock, because that's going to mean I'm going to have to watch I can't see my late movie. Now you're attached to a movie. The movie is getting in your way of making spiritual progress. I had another brother, keep asking me how many brothers I got. I got a lot of brothers. But one of my brothers, even satsang was too much for him. Because to go to satsang, we used to have satsang in the old days, I think, once a month. And that was too much for him. And I would go by his house, and I said, son, and we call each other son within our own family. We refer to each other like that. I guess we all take liberty to be each other's father. I don't know where it came from, but that's how it is. But in any case, I said, son, let's go. It's time. He said, well, I can't go today because I got to stay with my wife. You see, this is our time. You see, I can't let go. So satsang just has to pass. Attached, clinging, and so you really need to understand this thing, because that's what makes it impossible for you to surrender to the Dhamma, to that which is, to suchness, to isness, to what is. You can't surrender. You can't adapt. And remember, surrendering is adapting. Don't confuse it. We have a wrong concept of surrender. We think surrender means that you just is a form of defeatism. It's not defeatism. It is maximum creativity. You adapt to reality. But it's hard for you to adapt to reality if you are not fluid, loose, available. Larita almost call it chameleon-like. But the chameleon is not that the world should be a chameleon, Larita. You should be the chameleon. It is us who should be able to drop these identities as necessary according to reality. To not let our image and our identities prohibit us from acting out the role that is appropriate for reality. So you have to remember that most of us are playing a role. What's your role? What's your game? What role? What game are you playing? Think about it. We can sometimes look at life like a game. Right? And there's all kinds of games. The game of spiritual seeker, the game of householder, the game of businessman. We play so many roles, but there is a fundamental role, a defining role that we all play. And that role was adapted when you were a teenager. Now this is interesting. All of us, when we begin to emerge from our childhood and we move into our adolescence stage of development. In the adolescent stage, what is so traumatic about the adolescent stage of development is that is the stage that we start searching for a role, a defining role, a defining characteristic, who we are. And we try on roles in our adolescence. And I try on the role of a gangster. I'm gonna be a gangster, you know, and that may not fit. So I said, oh, I'm gonna get rid of that one. I'm gonna try on another role. I'm gonna be a scholar, a kid, you know, and you adapt all the things that go along with that role, you see. Or I'm gonna be a career woman, you know, and you put on that garb of career woman in your adolescence, right? Because that's what adolescence is about. It's trying to find your role. It's trying to find your identity. It's trying to get a sense of who you really are, right? And we usually find one, a principal one, and then we cling to that for the rest of our life. And we are crippled because this identity is inappropriate for every situation. Yes, there are some situations where your core identity is functional. It is right. It is appropriate. Be that way. Because being that way is appropriate for the reality of that situation. But then reality is going to give you another situation for being the way you are is totally inappropriate. And you're going to have to surrender. And you're going to have to adapt. And you can't do that. And so in that situation, you fail. In that situation, you experience a lot of misery, a lot of pain. And why? Because you will not adapt. And you can't adapt because you're clinging, you're attached. You don't want to be anything other than this image in the identity underlying. So we need to examine all of that, you see, and see what that's all about. All right. Now, before we look at that psychologically, let me just put this overview up here. And I'm going to run through this because this material is always in the book somewhere for those of you who want to get a real detailed grasp of it. But I want to give you a concept of the physics of ego. And by ego, again, I'm talking about this image and identity, how it came into being. You know, the dynamics underlying. Now, you remember we talked so much about the fact that we are all individuated forms of gods. That inside of us, at the core of our being, is that which is divine, right? Now, the African mystics and sages have developed a very beautiful system that gives us these kind of overviews of the anatomy of man's spirit, okay? And in Africa, there were different schools that had different versions, the schools at Heliopolis or the schools at Memphis or Thebes or what have you. But we won't get into that because we're not going to look at this from a purely academic perspective. So I'm just going to kind of merge all this stuff together. Again, the function is to give you an overview. And remember, it wasn't unique to African sages and mystics. In every religion, they give you some kind of an overview. In Judaism, they give you the Kaaba, and they give you all of the different levels of the trees of life and things of that nature. And the ideal of that is to give you a sense of how that which was in the beginning exists now in us, and how we have to develop and redevelop higher and higher levels of identity. So I'm going to be talking about this from the sense of your identity. And I'm going to base that on the fact of who we are theoretically. So for most of us, this is just a theoretical exercise. But the ancestor talks about the highest stage, the stage of Amen. That is the stage where the deity, that which exists, simply existed. There had been no differentiation. There had been no individualization. There had been no duality, no multiplicity, just a state of absolute oneness. You see, void, empty, without form, formless. In Hinduism, what they call niguna, without form. No form has took place and just the pure state of deity. Now, and though we're only talking in two dimensions, we're talking about the movement down from this absolute state of consciousness, down into your state and my state of consciousness now. So from this state of absolute consciousness, it moves down to Asar, the Asarian level, Osiris. At this level, individuation occurs. The absolute has become individuated into a being. Still no form, no body, no nothing, no time, no space, just the absolute has individuated itself. Okay? Then from this state, it comes down to the state of Tehuti. There's all kinds of spelling on these things, so let's not get caught up on that, okay? Now, these are where certain characteristics, you have to look at each of these as a covering on this total self, this real self, this real aspect. These are coverings. What in Hinduism they call kelshas, coverings. Like we got coverings on the body, shirts, pants, and stuff with coverings, but this is the essence, and these are covers. And again, the subject is big. I'm not going to get into all of the metaphysics of it. We could do that at a later time, but I just want to give you a sense of the evolution of identity. Now, those of you who are not familiar with evolution means the contracting of something down to a point. Evolution is the expanding of a point back up to the other opposite direction. You got my point? So deity evolutes down, okay? It's shrinking, if you will. Then you have this stage called Tahuti, okay? And this is the stage where, all of these qualities of God comes in. Omniscience, omnipotence, and all those other things. Three characteristics. Then you come down to the part that they call the Shekum, or the Shikert. And again, forget about the terms, they're not important. Okay? But all of these are just different manifestations of the three characteristics that make up and describes divinity. You see, omniscience, omnipotence, and omnipotence. All knowledge, total freedom, and all power. These are just symbols for those characteristics of God. And in the process as it further descends, it comes to Ma'at. You see, love now comes into the equation, the capacity to love and all that other stuff. Then Heru. Herukuti. Then Heru. Heru and all this stuff, this is just will, man's capacity to have will. This is willpower. You see how all these qualities are being added to the spirit as it descends in this evolution. Here, now it picks up the capacity to have a will. Okay? Where are we at? 4, 5, 6. Let me put 7 over here. Then Heru. And again, at this stage, the soul simply picks up the capacity now to have imagination, creative ability. We'll talk about this again. I'm just trying to get you to understand that with each descent, your identity, how you see yourself, go on decreasing. Because you begin to identify with the coverings. Your identity with God begins to deteriorate. And as you will see, the deterioration of your identity with God will deteriorate all the way down to where we are today. 8, Sabik, intellect and all that other stuff. 9 is Aset, the unconscious memory, blah, 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 blah. 10 is where we get interested, the Kat, the physical body. Okay? Now, by the time that the supreme identity, the real identity, makes its descent all the way down through all these different levels of creation, you see. It comes all the way down. This identity, the supreme identity that you are God, has descended into the identity that you are the physical body. You see where I'm going here? All right? I just want you to see how our identities are rooted in our bodies. Why do I want you to see this? Because the whole spiritual path consists of retracing those steps. To raise your identity from that of the body to that of the higher part of you, that's called a set, going back up to the higher part, until you have resurrected your identity all the way back up to the level of the supreme being. You follow me? That's what resurrection is about. What is it that is getting resurrected? It is your sense of who you are, your identity. Because you act out of your identity. All your action flows out of who you think you are, basically, you see. And the thing that makes the resurrection of your identity from the lowest level of the physical body and all of the associations that goes along with that, all the way back up to the supreme identity, that whole process is made difficult when we cling to this image that we have of ourselves at this physical level, in the lowest level. So I want you to see where we will be going with this thing when I talk about the resurrection and evolution of your identity now. So let us begin at the beginning and look at our particular images that we have of ourselves and the identities that we have associated with that. I've always asked the question, who am I? I representing the image and the identity. What is that? Who am I? And this is a question that we have to put to ourselves. And I'm saying that let's look at the psychological origin of this I that we're talking about, right? And what I'm telling you, you form the foundation of your image and your identity you formed in your adolescence. 12, 13, something like that. And that's the one that you can carry, and that's the one that we are attached to. And the question becomes how to become detached from that image and that basis of your identity. Because when you're attached, you don't have any freedom. Have you ever noticed how you don't have a real felt experience of freedom? Have you ever noticed that? And you think that your restrictions on your freedom is caused by other people. It's not. I mean, this is strange. For those of you who went through the Complete Anger series, remember we came to a point where we looked at the causal direction of your anger, and we discovered to our great amazement that nobody makes you angry, that nobody has ever made you angry, and that your anger has simply been your own interpretation of their behavior towards you. Yes, sister?
Well, I see what you're saying about, freedom and stuff, but suppose you're in a situation where, like our ancestors were, where they're actually enslaved and people were actually doing things to them, then it's not a thing where they are necessarily holding their own freedom back or saying, oh, I really choose not to be angry or something. I mean, they had no choice.
Sure. They definitely was in a form of captivity. And what I'm saying is that, sister, that perhaps our ancestors was able to survive that because they were able to move to another level where you could not be captive. They had another level, a deeper sense of freedom that was not limited to the physical. You see? Because in some respect, all of us are captured. You see? For instance, we're captured in certain situations in life. We feel trapped in certain situations. And it feels like that trapping is done from the outside. It really does. Are you following me? It's kind of subtle. Stay with you. You're getting a piece of this here. So just stay with me a little bit because it's a little subtle. But I'm saying that in your personal experience, because you're not enslaved without one, right? But you still don't have a sense of freedom. Have you noticed? Why is that? Why don't you feel free? You don't feel free to be who you are in your relationship. Do you? Do you? Is anyone in here free enough to really be who you are in your relationship?
Kind of relationship.
Any kind of relationship. We can take any.
I feel like you have to play a certain part or
You play that role. You feel that role? You feel the restriction of that role on you?
Yeah.
Do you all feel that? Huh?
No, I don't.
You don't feel that? All right.
Well, even if you have to be an adult,
That's a role.
that's a role.
Right? We're using
No,
this in
that's
the...
a fact. I'm right.
I mean, it's still a role.
Well,
Well, for instance, you have a role that you got to play as a woman. Right? You made a gender selection. Right? And yet there are some things that you want to do that is restricted by clinging to the gender roles. That is unladylike. Now inside you there's something masculine that want to climb trees, like climbing trees. There was a tomboy in you. Right? And at 13, you had to suppress that tomboy because mama said, girl, you getting too big now to be playing with them boys, right? Right? But something in you still wanted maybe to play with the boys. And that has to get suppressed. And that restricts you.
What about just something like, suppose, you know, like
We'll
as
work with
it's dangerous, more dangerous for a woman to be walking late at night. Suppose I say I just want to go walking late at night, but I know that I can't because it's dangerous. That's a restriction on my
That's a
freedom.
restriction
and I
on your
didn't
freedom.
put that there.
Who put it there?
Well, I mean, if I
You were
went out,
conditioned, right?
but it wasn't me who did it though. It's other people who did it.
They put that in you.
They didn't put it in me. It's about, they put it there.
They created the situation that made it unsafe for you to walk at night.
Yes.
I see. You're innocent.
But I wouldn't. I'm not.
The point I'm saying is that we'll get into that. We'll get into a social analysis. I want you to stay with this part first. I want you to feel in yourself and really feel deep in yourself and really see, are you free? Are you really having the experience of freedom?
But would freedom be,
Psychologically, emotionally. Don't reduce it to just this little physical thing. I want to see, are you emotionally and psychologically free?
okay, you got choice. Freedom has to do with choice. Are you king of your spirit? Are you, I mean, if you are, then you wouldn't be compelled to act on that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that has a
Yes,
lot to do
there's
with
a lot of that sense of compulsion.
right. You're
Right.
not compelled to act on certain things. You know, that's how you would know that you have freedom.
Not only that, the very action that you choose
Right.
has a certain compulsion to it. Because you got to somehow stay within the outline of your image and identity. Right?
It's that choice.
I can't do a certain thing because that goes against my image and my sense of who I am. It restricts your freedom. You have to squeeze this one tight.
I feel it most on my job.
Yeah, I
You
was
feel it
gonna
most
say
on
your
your
work.
job.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Your work role, the things that are expected of you based on who you are as an employee, things you may want to say to your employer. You know that you're limited in saying it because
Yes.
that's going to change the relationship that you have with your employer. It may
Right.
ultimately affect your continuing to work there.
Yes, yes. And that's another form of the restriction on your freedom.
Yeah.
But I'm saying there's a kind of restriction on your freedom that is self-imposed. All right? And because, yes, we do have these restrictions that you all are talking about, but I want to now turn your attention to the restriction on your own freedom that is self-imposed. Yes, Setra. You getting it?
Well, your mind will promote you freedom.
Hmm?
Anytime in which that we come to the realization that these are some of the things in which that we must implement in order to be free. Automatically, again, those good intentions. You know, you have the intention to be free. However, your mind just won't permit.
And when
Your
we
heart
say-
is there.
Uh-huh.
Your heart is there, but you know, when you want to put into practice those things in which that you truly desire, somehow your mind conflicts with it.
And when we say mind, what are we talking about? What I'm saying is that this mind that we're talking about is really nothing but your own sense of identity and image and all of the conditions imposed upon you. I want you you to try to understand and stay with me because it's a little subtle, but it's going to be all right. I want you to begin to see the imposition, the self-imposition on your freedom. Let me give you an example. Let's say that when we, at the birth of the cool, now we 13 years old, right? And I'm going to add cool to my image of myself. I'm cool, right? Now, in my acting out this whole role of being cool, there's certain things that I can't do, right? Because I'm restricted by my clinging, my effort to perpetuate the image of being cool. I'm too cool for that, right? So I can't do that, right? Even if that is what makes sense to do. Even if that is what is the intelligent thing to do, I can't do it because I'm too cool. Right? Let's say I'm independent. Because you got, when you look at it, part of the exercise going to be, I want you to go and see what your thing is. Because that is what's crippling us. Let's say it's independence. You know, I'm independent, I'm self-sufficient, right? I have that is a defining characteristic of the image I've created of myself. My identity is rooted on that. That means that I can't ask you for nothing. I can't ask nobody for nothing. Now, how you going to move through life not asking people for stuff? It's not possible. I can't ask nobody, could you help me? I can't answer that because it goes against my image. I'm independent. And it restricts me. It contracts me. It narrows me. It limits me. Because I can't go past the barrier of my own ego. You see? My own image. You look for stuff in your life. You're going to find a lot of it. And remember, until you practice this a little bit, you won't see much, but it doesn't mean nothing is there. You just don't have enough awareness. One of the interesting phenomena that happen in meditation is that when you sit in meditation for the first time, your mind gets busy. Satra, you're talking about the mind getting in people's way. The mind don't get in the way of people that don't meditate because there ain't no threat. There's no challenge involved there. It's when you meditate. And when you meditate, you start discovering a lot of stuff about yourself you didn't know because all that garbage starts bubbling up. And it creates the illusion that you're getting worse. You start saying, man, I'm getting worse, not better on the path. I hear it all the time. They say, Bhagwan, I don't know what's wrong with me. I read the teachings, heard the I'm just no good, and I'm lazy. And in fact, instead of getting better, I'm becoming worse. But I'm telling them, no, you were always that. You're simply becoming more aware that you were lazy. You were lazy all the time. You just didn't know it. You were shiftless all the time. You just didn't know it because there was no awareness. But meditation increases your awareness and you become aware of all of these things. In some sense, as your awareness increases, you will become aware of all of the limitations that you have imposed on yourself. And you will begin to discover that the greatest barrier to your experience of freedom is your own clinging to this image of yourself. And therefore detachment from the image that we have formed of ourselves becomes one of the starting points of the spiritual journey. Yes, Shanae?
I was going to say, I think maybe we're more aware of our work image because that's a newer image that we created.
Yes.
The other one was created so long ago that we're so comfortable in it.
Yes.
And again, when the changes happen in our lives, we start understanding how many images we've created in different, because coming back home, there's an old image I'm coming back to.
That's right.
As a married woman, I had an image, and it worked on another person.
Yes.
We ought to be insane from all of it.
That's true. Now, today you have a good point, and very often, and that is the thing that really brings it to the front, is that you really begin to feel that as you move through these changes. So changes and challenges come to you, and you find that you can't take advantage of it. You can't get into it. You can't do any of that. Again, you're restricted. You almost feel compelled to act a certain way. As Rob said, this compulsion to act a certain way. Where did that come from? You have a compulsion in you, a predisposition to act a certain way all the time. What is that rooted in? certain things, many things you can't do. Many limitations you impose upon yourself because of this.
Of your image.
Of your image. Your identity, your sense of who you are, the role that you are playing. Yes, Khadija.
And I think back to when we were talking about the parents saying to us on one hand, oh, change is going to come. But then on the other hand, we have the duality as black people of our parents having to deliberately teach us to do some things that, yes, curtailed our freedom, but meant safety.
Yes.
You know, you have to, for many years, I couldn't walk slowly because I was constantly told with my parents were from the South, walk like you got someplace to go. White people don't like it when black people are walking slow. You know?
Hanging out.
Yeah, and I consequently took years to just be able to take a stroll because I was all, you know, you look like this because that's exactly why they don't want you and you never get it and they won't. And so, you know, besides the fact of a normal person having the image problems, we have
Yes.
the double image, double language,
Yes.
and we could be one way sometimes at home and another way in the outer community. And that's why I think the job thing is so stressful for us because it's always like this can be snatched away from us at any time. It isn't our world. You know, we just
Yes.
run out there like mice in the kitchen at night, you know,
Yes.
and snatch a little piece of something. You
That's
know.
right, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Very often, the quest is for security. We talked about that earlier. And to be safe, you give up your freedom. Very often you find that it's almost a direct relationship between the amount of freedom you experience and the amount of security you're pursuing. That where there's the ability to function in maximum insecurity, there's a sense of maximum freedom, and vice versa. Where there's a sense of great security, there's no sense of freedom. But I want you to really understand this thing here, because this is key as we pursue further. You have to understand and see the limiting role that your own clinging to your image and your identity played in your life, especially with respect to your sense of freedom. And I'm saying that deep down inside of us, we don't feel free. And this is a painful state to be in. Yes.
So, is it the Egyptians that talk about nete?
Nete, that's
Is
those
that what
are
we're seeking?
Hindus.
Oh, is that what we're seeking?
Yeah. The nete again is referring to that same 0 down to 10 schematic. When our identity is at this level with the physical body, they say nete, you're not that. That's not who you are. That's not the
this,
basis
not
of your
that.
identity.
Yeah.
Then they say, well, what about number 9? Nete, not that either. Nete. Until you get all the way here. You see? And at this level, they'll say, Pat, from Asi, thou art that state. You see? Aham brahmasi, Allah hokka. You know? That's again when you have moved your level of identity from the lowest to the higher. Because I'm trying to get you to understand that there are many identities in you. You are made up of all these identities, right? All of those are your identities. I'm saying that you got 10 levels of identity. I'm saying that you got 9 levels of identity that you don't even use. I'm saying that you cling to this natal identity, this physically generated identity. And that limits you because there are many situations in life that it'll call for you to act out of one of your other levels of identity. You follow me on this? There's many situations in life where you have to be something other than what you tend to try to always be. And that means that you will not succeed in those situations. You will have conflict. There will be conflict in those situations because you can't adapt, you can't surrender, you can't get with it. Larita?
So the basis of what we consider as something like safety and security is just fear disguised.
Absolutely.
In essence.
Absolutely fear disguised. Right? That's a beautiful way of phrasing it. It is just fear. It is just absolute fear. Because you're trying to keep something bad from happening to you. Fundamentally. Isn't that true? Isn't that what we all are unconsciously trying to do? You're trying to avoid something bad happening.
So in other words, loss or gain. We're trying to avoid loss or
I'm trying to get gain. You can do that. That's a way of putting it. You see. But you're actually trying to avoid pain while at the same time experience pleasure. Fundamental. But you certainly don't want anything to happen to you that will harm and hurt you. You're trying to avoid it like hell. We all are. And when it looks like something bad is going to happen to us and we can't avoid it, what is our result? We have a panic attack. We really do. That's anxiety. Anxiety is a form of fear. You see, we become neurotic. Afraid of situations and circumstances that we can't handle. We become very crystallized. But I'm pushing you here. Next time when we get together, because I want to pick up and go into a dimension of this thing that's going to require your ability to feel this thing. You need to feel. So maybe one of the exercises that you need to go home and do until we get together again, you need to find out what is the basis of your identity and what is the basis of the image that you have of yourself. How did you get that? I'm not asking you to even discover yourself spiritually. I know you can't do that without meditation. I'm just trying to say, get a good sense of who you are psychologically and emotionally. See where that came from. Are you still that person in high school? Are you still 12 years old psychologically? Are you still playing the same role that you developed for yourself right out of diapers? I mean, what's going on here? And is that role limiting? I want you to see, is it limiting? How it limits you? At least this much self-knowledge you have to have. And you can't read no book to get it. You're going to have to do this work. You're going to have to do some reflection. You're going to have to reflect on this. You have to sit down. You got to ponder this. Because I'm telling you that we cripple ourselves because we cling to this image that we have of ourselves. You're doing it for show. Now, you're going to stay in the marriage. You're not happy. You're miserable. You understand? You're suffering. But you're going to stay in that marriage because being married is a part of your image. You understand me? No love going on. No joy going on. You're fighting. You're miserable. But you're going to cling to it because it's a part of your image. And you can't let your image go. You're like that monkey in that hole. Screaming. Complaining to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. This man ain't no good. He make me sick. Then why are you there? So for what are you clinging? Your image. The same is with your job. Do you know most people who die in this country of heart attack die on Monday morning on their way to work? You hate the job. You really do. You don't like it. You see? But you can't change. You can't leave. Because most of your identity is tied up and based on your job. It plays a big role in who you are. You know, I'm a manager of this, I'm a manager of that. You see? I work, I'm a hard-working person. Even this, I'm a hard-working person is something you cling to. Yes, sister?
When you let go of that image, then what?
When you let go of that image, then you're available to travel throughout the whole complex of other images that you have. You're free to be other things.
But
it's like a death. It's scary.
yeah, very.
It's very scary.
That you become very,
Yes.
very vulnerable.
You become very, very vulnerable. It looks like that. It's a very frightening. Kiva, it is the most frightening experience you can have. In the tradition of mystics, they call it the dark night of the soul. And we all have to go through that. It is very, very frightening. Because as you begin to melt down, you begin to disappear. You feel lost. You see, it's a very scary experience. That's why it's so important to be involved with a teacher or a guru, somebody that can steer you through that part of the journey, because it's very frightening. Because you're having to shed something. You see, something has to be buried. Something is dying in you. But you have to die first. You see, now all mystics have talked about that. You see, these mystics, they're not talking nonsense. It's Buddha, and they're talking nonsense, or either they're telling you the truth. They're telling you, you're going to have to die. But you thinking that that's just poetry. You think, oh, I'm going to go ahead and be this thing, and that no, I'm not going to have no suffering, I'm not going to die, I'm going to bypass all of that. That's not going to happen. Unless the egg gives up its identity as an egg, it cannot become a chicken. You have to give up the lower identities to get into the higher identity. How would you function out of your identity with Asa, or as long as you cling into your identity as Bhagwan? It's not going to happen. And that is a hard thing. And that's the hardest step. It is really, really, really hard. Because keeping your fear is warning. What's going to happen? Right? What's going to happen? You see, this movement into the unknown, the mysterious. Yet that is the price that has to be paid.
Let me just say something, because this is something that really, and I know we're all basically on the same path in this family. And one thing that really used to make me want to, even though I knew I had to face myself, but made it difficult, was that knowing that you're going somewhere where you don't really know, until I began to really contemplate what darkness actually was. And when I realized that out of darkness, it was just darkness, it's just the potential. But out of darkness, a lot of good things emerged from it. And once I began to see darkness from that light, it made me not be so much afraid, but want to see what is going to emerge from it. So whenever I'm going through a difficult situation and I'm faced, I have to go back into that darkness or into that cocoon. I have to know that there's something, amazing that's going to come out. I'm going to be created a whole different person when I come out. That to me, it helps me, because now I'm not afraid anymore. It just releases it. And that's one of the things, the dying part is not so bad, because when I emerge again, something else good is going to come from there. And that really helps, especially for somebody who's on that path, never been on there before, and just the whole idea of darkness just scares you so much, and the whole terminology.
Yes. That whole idea of change,
Right.
cease being that which you were. I mean, we even see it reflected just on the ordinary level. Suddenly you single again. Now this is scary. If you've been in a relationship a long time, okay, well, we're going to have to get a divorce. This is coming to an end. It's just a matter of paperwork. And then your mind is trying to think of now, what I'm going to do. How would I function? Who would I be after the divorce? Friends. How would I fit in again? I mean, there becomes a scramble to form a new identity, right? And being divorced is made difficult if one has lost the ability to form a new identity. Who have been trapped in that old identity so long, you can't be anything else, and then you shrink, you see, and then you stand still in life, and life stops moving for you. You stop living, in fact, because to live now you have to become something else. Yes, sir, bro.
During the break, Bomani and I were talking about this transition phase in terms of developing a freedom for ourselves. And one of the things in which that we talked about and explored was this inability for, where's Bomani? Maybe I shouldn't talk so much. For us to drop this, when we first dropped Christianity, the punishment in which that we had to endure, because again, it was conditioned in us that this was the religion and nothing else.
Yes.
And once we dropped this religion, the wrath of God was just going to
Wipe you out.
Wipe us out.
That's
Because
right.
again, our grandparents and our forefathers have taught Christian. And it's this innate fear, this Willie Lynch syndrome,
Yes.
in which that we've been beaten and conditioned. And it's a hard thing to realize that, once you get beyond that, to a certain extent, you don't have an identity, because your whole relationship with God has been based on that particular teaching. And so you become fearful. You become, and paranoid because again, you're feeling everyone in which that you talk to, especially family, man. Why aren't you taking your kids to church? Man, how come you not reading your Bible? Man, why? And it's a constant beating over the head. You know, even in terms of outside of your family, you know, the secular community. It's always this thing of about being good Christian, being good American, being good this and that, until it put one in a state of confusion as to whether or not you made the right decision. Because this path thing, you're not going to read anything that's going to convince you that you have. It's just a continuation of reaching in the darkness, trying to get some light on the surface.
It is an unfolding, it is the dark part of the path. It is the most difficult part of the path. Once one comes out of that darkness, then progress on the path becomes easy. It is symbolized, Sacral, in the tradition about opening up the eye of Heru, the third eye, the inner eye. That now that you can see, but until you can reach the eye center here, until you can open up this eye of Heru, until you can open up this Tisratil, this third eye, path is very difficult. Very difficult, very arduous, fraught with fear. And the fear is this meltdown. And Kiba, you're right. So I'm not going to poo-poo that fear. That would be wrong. It is a frightening thing, but you can't grow into a deeper dimension of your being unless you are willing to drop this thing. And when you look at it closely, and that's why I asked you to do the homework, I really want you to look at it closely, bring some awareness to it, and look how silly it is that what you're clinging to. What are you clinging to? You clinging to all this, I am cool, I am independent, I'm, you know, this. This is nonsense. You're clinging to ego contents. It's really nothing to cling to. Why are you going to restrict your life so much clinging to this mythology? You know, it'll loosen your grip on it. I'm a Christian. Now, what are you clinging to that for? You're not a Christian. You're not practicing anything. You've not been transformed. You don't even, you know, Jesus is not even real for you. You're just clinging. You know, you're just clinging to that. And that restricts. It's silly. But it's still difficult. Yes, Jim?
We have even in our presence right now, we're in the midst of this fear thing with the Million Man March. Everybody, I had a lot of brothers say, well, do you understand the repercussions of this? But do they understand the opportunities that could come out of it?
That's right.
You know, there's a lot of fear.
A lot of fear.
Mixed with the march.
Sure it is. A lot of fear. A lot of stuff. See, this is a big thing. This dissolving of this lower identity in order to move into a higher level. I'm talking about moving into higher levels of who you are. I am simply talking about a restoring to, every time you are able to recapture an additional part of your identity, you increase your freedom. You get part 3 of your identity, and you increase your freedom, free-falling as well, until you become totally free in this world. Totally free. Free to be. Yes, Khadija.
I think that something we saw today is very important, which was the renaming of your brother. And I think part of that freedom comes from feeling the right to name ourselves and to name a direction in which we're saying, I'm going to attempt to travel there. And all the naysayers, as the brother back there said, with again, many times our family saying, you know, you'll go to hell. As I look around the room, it's almost, I almost get a chuckle because I look at this sister and she's sitting there in her African garb. Everybody's sitting with different names and different clothing, and we have those options. Whereas when those of us that were in the 60s remember, Rukia is my daughter, and I tell them story my children all the time, stories of when I came home with no hair. You know, you're never going to get a job, you're never going to get a man, you're never going to get anything, you know, and so it proved to be false.
It proved to be false, but it was terrifying at the time, because what happened is that these other people keep this image and identity intact in us, don't they? It seems like there's a force that people put pressure on us to remain locked into that. This is what, now don't you be anything else. And you're trapped into that, aren't you?
But did you just have, once you have, I think, the opportunity to step outside of them, because, you know, a couple of years later when I changed my name, it was, well, now you're never going to get a job, you're never going to get a, you know, each thing is all, but after a while you notice that the tune when you attempt to regain your freedom, is always the same. And after a while, it doesn't bite you.
Stop out,
You know.
and you get used to it.
You realize it's
And
an
you
illusion.
can go on and make growth now, for the first time. What said Ra, when you drop your Christianity, or at least your parents' version of it, and lightning did not strike you, right? You see, nothing happened to you. Then it gives you a little bit more courage to go on
Get
further.
in the house for 2 years. No.
Took 2 years. But what I want you to begin to understand that long after these people are gone, influencing the structure, forcing you to confining you into that structure, we remain in that structure because of conditioning. Like now, for instance, your conscience, what you call your conscience, that 25,000 hours of parenting, that's what that is. Now your parents are not even around, but they're still exercising. That force is in you. And now you become self-perpetuating. What I'm saying is that this image was formed, no doubt, shaped, no doubt, by all these forces, parents, environment, brother, sister, but it's reached a point where it's not self-perpetuating, right? Look at all the things we did when we were 12 or 13 years old in our efforts to try to find our adult role. All the things, right? We started drinking, at least the brothers did, because that gives you a sense of being a man. You want to do all that you thought meant being a man. You smoke, you drink, you curse, because you said, this is what goes with being a man. And I want to be a man. So you start forming this role, this image of man, and you perpetuate it. And you can't, and then it becomes hard to stop it, even when it's inappropriate, because you're into that, right? You're into that. I mean, it's really deep. It's really deep. Let's say one of the roles that a lot of black men try to play with this player. You'd be surprised. It wasn't but a few: player, pimp, hustler. I mean, these were the roles that we could select. That's all society gave us. That's all we were allowed to be. So most of us, at least from my age in time, selected one of these: pimp, player, hustler. Right? And you can see the ones that became a player. They played that role. They picked it up when they were 12, 13 years old, and now they 50 years old, 60 years old, talking about the lady. Look at that lady, fine. You see? Man, look at the back on that sister. Now this is absurd. You 50 years old looking at the back on some sister somewhere, and you're gleeful about it. Because you think that's who you are. It's deep. I mean, it's really deep. And I'm sure that sisters pick up the games that women's supposed to be. And they play that stuff, right? And I'm saying, and all of these are limited. I can't give you specifics. This is one thing where I can't put on the board for you. Because I'm telling you, in each and every one of you is different. It's unique. I want you to do the homework. I want you to go in and see it. You see, you got to go do the homework. And I want you to see the foundation of your image and your identity. I want you to find that thing, right? Because that's the thing you're going to have to liberate yourself from first. The first freedom is from your own image of yourself. The first freedom is from your own self. That's the first level.
What's the homework? What was it?
I want you to look in yourself, and we're going to have to look 3, 4, 5, 6 times. At first, you may not see nothing because you ain't used to it. You never looked before. Don't think it ain't nothing there because you don't see nothing the first time. Go back. I want you to look, and I want you to see, Dorothy, what is the foundation that your image and your identity is rooted in. What that is. And when did you develop it? At what age were you when you developed this image of yourself and this identity that goes along with it? And what is your role? What's your game? What are you playing? What game are you playing? We talked on some tape. Is there some tape in the library somewhere? I know we talk about the games of life, but where is that at? The hog in the trough game, the king of the dunghill game, the Moloch games. I talked about these games somewhere. Satara, you have that tape? It was over at Gudamaji House. You never recorded it? Oh boy, I have to do that all over. I'm not going to. It's too much.
Next set song.
No, that's not. There's different games that we play. I want you to find your games, you know. But if you can't find your game, at least find where it's rooted at. You see. Now, this is interesting. Khadija, this is your daughter, right? So we can almost look into her, right? I'm going to see a lot of your stuff in there, right? A lot of stuff you put in her.
Her fear of going out at night.
Her fear of going out. You put that in there, right? You did that, right? Which restricts her freedom, right? And she got a lot of more images of herself that are based on how you interacted with her, right? And she's thinking that her image of herself is original. This poor child sitting here thinking that there's something original in her. And the reality is that you can look from your side, you can see I put all that stuff in her.
You know
What's original in you, sister? What is your original face like? The stuff without your mother. Huh? What are you independent of her parenting, her conditioning, her teaching, her training? Who are you without all that stuff? That's what you have to find yourself. Because all of your actions is coming out of that, isn't it? Do you see how the image and your sense of identity that you have gotten from your mom and your dad and your family of origin is forming the basis that drives your behavior, your decision making, and all that stuff? Do you see the limitation? What are the things you can't do because you are the daughter of
Okay,
Khadija?
so just suppose that my thing about the going out at night, isn't that true though?
Huh? You should be asking her. She gave you the teaching. There's your guru over there.
What I can say about the going out at night is that
Isn't
it's
it-
interesting thing about when you plant something in their minds early, even if you yourself try to change it,
You can't change it.
you can't change it because I have tried to explain to her that she was raised in a very different environment, and when I talked to her once about people saying, well, we're going to take back the night, these rallies that people, both men and women, everybody is sickened by. They would like to go to the store, or they would just like to walk outside. And as you said, maybe stop the curtailing of our own freedom and say, well, the night is not going to belong to the criminals, that we'll take it back. She argues with me, and
Now
it's
she
like,
argues with
yeah,
you?
and it's like,
Huh?
no, I changed my mind. I want you to.
I think that it is true that it's not always safe, and there's situations where isn't it true that your freedom is curtailed in certain situations, and it's not because I did anything about. I was like, oh yeah, I just wanted You can go to a certain situation, and people will try their darndest to curtail your freedom, and it's not because I was like, oh, please come over and curtail my freedom. They are doing that to me.
It's uninvited.
And there's lots of people. Well, it seems to me that a lot of this is good. But suppose you're living in a place where there's nothing you can do. Where you are.
I have to talk to you separate because I have to do some work on you. I did it on him. Lieutenant Rashnish, you want to
I was
help
gonna
her?
tell her.
I done the work
You
on
can
him.
go
So
to Cabrini Green at 4 o'clock in the morning and see them sisters walking all around. You can go up in Lincoln Park and them white girls walk around all night long. Believe me,
Absolutely.
I work there, midnight shift and all. I don't care what time of the day or night, they get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock, walk the dogs alone.
Absolutely.
Coming from a party. You can go right to Cabrini Green and you'll see them sisters all night long.
But you don't have to go to Cabrini, Cabrini
But I was
Green.
just giving you two
wasn't-
extremes.
I wasn't raised with that image of fear of the night. It doesn't bother me to be out traveling at night. It never has.
But you see, she was raised as a Muslim in a very strict. She is no longer practicing in terms of Orthodox
maybe not out,
Muslim.
but inwardly.
But it's
Yeah,
still there.
exactly.
She was raised that she
Yeah.
couldn't.
Things are still stuck.
There were these things that you couldn't do, and it's like it's still there. And
Let me-
it's
let
really
me-
hard to remove that.
Let me go directly to your point.
There's some truth to that.
There's limitations and restriction about the image and identity. Now you also have limitations that are imposed by your image of the world. You have a world image, don't you? right? You have an image of the world. You have an image of life. And let's say if your image of life is something that you formed somewhere when you're 7 years old, and usually that's where it's at, right? Then you're going to be predisposed to approach the world a certain way. And out of that predisposition to approach the world a certain way, depending on how out of whack it is with reality, to that same extent you experience a restriction or limitation on your own movement in the world. You follow me? But I'm trying to get you to start first, but you're precocious here. So we'll talk. But I don't even want you looking so much at your world image. I want you to get this one first, and we're going to move progressively up there. But she's in the right direction because you do have an image of the world. Conclusion that you reached about the world when you were 7 years old somewhere, from your parents and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that is what you're clinging to, that image of the world.
And there's no fact in that?
The image, that snapshot of the world you took 20 years ago, that world don't even exist anymore. This is a brand. The world is creating itself minute by minute by minute. Reality is in a flux. It is constantly changing. But now let's say at one time, at the time your mother gave you the teaching, this might have been a very dangerous situation 20 years ago. Now outside in that same block, it's a waste, nothing there. But you're still acting out of that old stuff and a restriction, you see. As you get into this, we'll be able to squeeze a lot of it there, because we'll come to your world image. Not only do you have world image, you have images about others. Women have images about men have images about women, blah, blah, blah. We got a lot of loosening up to do. But the first step is the image with yourself. And those are going to be our trajectory, okay? First, we're going to look at this detachment from the image and the identity that we formed of ourselves. Get detached enough now to edit that thing, right? To free yourself up some, to give yourself more potential, more room, more space to be. Then we'll start loosening up this thing with the others, and then finally we'll end on the world. But we're going to take it in a sequential order. And this is going to be the hardest step, because it's easy to see the world. You can't see yourself. You're going to have a lot of trouble with this homework because you can't see yourself really. You really can't. I mean, it's hard for you to really see yourself. You've not done that. You don't have that inner vision yet. You don't know how to look in yourself. It's easy to look outside yourself. But to turn the direction of your vision and look inside of yourself, that you're going to find it's a challenge. But you have to do that.
What are some,
Any questions about it?
What would be some tools that you can use to do that?
Okay.
I know the meditation is
All right, here's the
one,
things
but-
that I'd like for you to do that help you loosen up. First of all, I want you to make a list. I want you to describe yourself first, just on a sheet of paper. You just get you a blank sheet of paper. Now, the key to this exercise, now folks, the key to all homework is you got to be honest. You understand? You got to be ruthlessly honest. And Khadija, Sandra, Shanae, don't y'all be cheating. Don't be discussing this with each other. We don't want a composite here. And it's private, personal. You know, hide it under your mattress somewhere. That's the only way that you're going to get the requisite degree of honesty. I want you to be ruthlessly honest about it.
That was a good point, too, because we wouldn't talk about, she wouldn't let me read what I wrote
Good.
a couple of days ago, because
Good.
it's a similar story, but would I give her,
Yes.
she wanted to write her own.
She wanted it on. So that's good. So you write down, I want you to describe yourself. Describe yourself. Give a description of yourself.
Physical attributes as well. Physical.
Well, physical, I think it's we all got that part. I hope so, right? I want you to move to the psychological side. I want you to give a psychological description of yourself. Mhm.
Was that wrong?
I want you to do a self-portrait, an emotional and psychological self-portrait. Okay? And I want you to be honest. Now you can draw from all kind of other research, if you want to do your research, because you're going to probably think, well, how do my mom see me? How my brothers see me? How my sisters see me? You're going to be having to draw on a lot of the commentary of other people, because most of your portrait of yourself is based out of that material. So, but I want you to as far as possible, try to come up with a self-portrait of yourself. Now, I don't want you fantasizing. Don't give me what you want to be, okay? Because I've gotten a lot of paper people describing how they want to be. I don't want to know what you want to be. You say, I want to know what you are. I want to know what you are. A self-portrait, emotionally, psychologically. Now, as you form this self-portrait, keep on. And you've listed these characteristics. You know, 1, 2, 3, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. All right? Then I want you to try to locate this kind of composition in history. I want you to put it in a kind of historical context. For instance, let's say number 1, I'm real independent. All right, about what age were you when you realized that? I want you to locate it on a timeline. You know, we got to do a little archaeology here. We want to link it into your age line, right? You know, I'm real cool. I'm cool, suave. At what age did you become cool, suave? 12. Right? I want you to locate chronologically the time frame where this came in. Okay? It's a little tedious, but it's beautiful. If you do the homework, this is transformative. It will really transform you. And I'm telling you, you're going to see stuff you would have never seen. You know, and you go in therapy, and you be in therapy 20 years before you can see this deeply into yourself. Believe me, said there are other therapists, guy makes a lot of money, you know, stringing out the process. I'm telling you how to condense this process, you know what I mean, into a weekend. Now, this is not bad. Look at the money you're going to save and the hell that you won't be putting yourself through. All right, so once you got all your characteristics up there, and then I want you to locate it historically, back in time, about what age you were when you discovered that this was true about you, right? Okay. And then I want you to see, and this is the hardest part, I want you to begin to see what things, we call them niyamas. What are your niyamas? The things you can't do because you're like this. I want you to give me your niyamas. And there may be good stuff here too. So remember, you know, don't get into judgment. We just want knowledge here. You know, this is not about right, wrong, good, bad, moral, immoral. That's why I want you to be ruthlessly honest. Well, you know, I can't practice homosexuality. You know what I mean? I can't steal. I mean, whatever it is, I don't know what it will be, but get your niyama. Things that you feel strongly that you cannot do because of who you are. I want you to get a real good beam in on that. And now if you can do that, then we can, next week, we can process, we can make a quantum leap on this subject. But if we make that quantum leap and you've not done the homework, then, you know, I'm just going to be flapping my mouth for naught. And you're going to sit here and be bored to death. You see, it'll be a wasted workshop. So I want you to do the homework. You got to do the homework. And you got to find them, you got to see the limitations that you're clinging to this portrait of yourself plays in your own life. So we could take a minute or two, just make sure you don't have any, if you got any questions, don't feel shy at all, because I know this is different. This is for a lot of us. You see, we're not used to this degree of self-examination. You see? And remember, can't nobody tell you this about yourself. So ain't no sense Tony calling Avia and Avia calling Tony. I know there's a lot of networks going on in this room here. All right? Can't nobody help you here, right? This is work you got to do yourself, you see. But go into that and get that portrait. And once we get that, then we're going to move on down the road. And I think at the end of this workshop on attachment, that you're going to, like that pauper, you're going to turn that penny loose. That's my whole objective, is to get you to turn that loose. Because this present thing you have is a penny. It's not worth much value. Look at what it's producing. Look at all of the limitations, all of the restrictions that it has on you. Try to wave something higher in front of you. That higher part of your being. All right, any question now? How many gonna do the homework? Let me see hands because y'all be tricking me. So let's get count. Huh? Emma, you gonna do the homework?
I did some.
You did already, Sandra? Please do the homework. Sadat?
Tony has started
Huh?
tonight.
What about you? You're not doing that homework. Yes. Do that homework, and it'll set you free. All right, enough for today. Oh, one last thing.